Hey everybody, welcome back to the Billy Club, the show where we take a look at the adventures of Marvel's Crimson Crusader through his many, I guess at this point, still kind of yellowy adventures.
Yeah, pretty yellow out here.
Yeah, right? You guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION.
And I'm Tori. You can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I.
Now, you guys may notice that I'm decked out in a little bit of spider gear, right? Whip, motherfuckers, right? Because we're here to talk about one of the first non-Daredevil appearances that Daredevil ever did dare to devil.
Yeah. He swung on over to the, I guess, Queen side of things. And we've got a burrow hopping, bopping crossover.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing it 71871 great, and he's feeling fine about whipping his ass through the burrows, right?
It's true.
And the thing I love about this story is also one of the kind of like foibles of it, I guess. But, you know, we're here to talk about Amazing Spider-Man number 16 with a soupçon of Amazing Spider-Man number 18. Just the slightest soupçon. Right, it's not even an amuse-bouche because my bouche was not amused.
No, it was not. Nor was mine.
My bouche was sad, right? But we're here to talk about these two fantastic issues, both of which are by the incredible Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the incredible team that is best known for Amazing Spider-Man. And okay, now this story is significant. When I say the story is significant, this would be reprinted no less than 2 times in the same book.
Really?
Yeah, a title called Marvel Tales, and Marvel Tales primarily did deal in reprints, right? But it was reprinted in Marvel Tales 11 and 154.
Why is this a particularly like Spider-Man important moment? Because like this one.
Yeah.
Where all that's achieved is that Spider-Man became hypnotized for a little bit and he doesn't go on a date?
The one.
Why is this so important?
Because we continue to see the significance of this meeting radiated out until today. I want to talk about the significance of the incorporating moment of the MC unification of Daredevil and Spider-Man bringing Daredevil into Spider-Man through No Way Home. And it's this moment that sort of changed everything somehow. And I'm going to go on my it's the young man's I want to be journey moment for one more time. By the way, I am, of course, spider pooling it because that is how I Spidey, right? Other than that, give me some Aranya, give me some Mayday, give me some Miguel, right? I like my spiders a little spicy, right? So the key thing here is when Spider-Man came out, Spider-Man was how young men interacted with heroism. You know what I mean? Like Captain America was a big motherfucker who took, some government legal roids and had a good day of it. You know what I mean? Iron Man is a billionaire philanthropist. I said it. Full on thropist. So he is also not an attainable, but Spider-Man, and this was all recently pointed out beautifully by contributor Nathan to X's for Podcast, the partner show of this series, but Spider-Man is the kind of like accessible everyman. Now imagine you're the accessible everyman. You're 16 years old, and like nobody at school takes you seriously, but like you are the strongest guy your age ever.
I mean, like, yeah, we saw this when Daredevil was 16. We talked about this, the idea that this is the nerd's dream.
Yeah. Now imagine you're the nerd.
I am.
Imagine you're the nerd and you're the so imagine you're Spider Tori, okay? And you thwip your way into a situation where Dare Nico is hanging out and he doesn't know you're 16.
Right.
To him, you're an adult. You're also a man. And this moment of acceptance, of fraternal brotherhood is every time an older brother gave a younger brother a beer and didn't realize it was his younger brother's first beer. This isn't Spider-Man's first team up. This isn't even Daredevil's first team up, as in a matter of speaking, he and the Fantastic Four had, we'll call it, a moment. And
Daredevil didn't team up. Matt teamed up.
Okay, and I'll take it, right? But this is the start of a great friendship. This is the start of a defining friendship.
And it's also really interesting that you bring up that like Spider-Man is just so pleased to be considered one of the adults, that like he's cool, because like one of the like the moment that Matt meets him, he's like, well, that felt like a 16-year-old inside of that suit. Well, that's weird. But then he doesn't treat him like a child ever, right. Which is something that speaks on Matt and Daredevil, is that there might be a 16-year-old kid in there, but like, well, we all gotta punch bad guys, so it's cool. He signed up for this.
And you know, it has such an impact because we see that in Peter's treatment of Miles to this day. Mm-hmm. So like, it's a really lovely parallel that, you know, it just so tremendously supports why what we might even call the Spider-Man experiment is so viable with heroism. You know, Batman was already like an old bitch, right? And, you know, Captain America was like saggy, right? But like, here comes Spider-Man. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
It's a lot of adjectives right here that I don't think anybody agrees with.
I don't either. I totally don't either. But like, when Robin is introduced, Robin is a sidekick. You know
Yes. Spider-Man feels like a companion that gets to run the TARDIS.
Yeah. And so there is something so to the heart of the argument of the nature of Spider-Man and Daredevil. And I know you've gotten a chance to read some of it, but every time, and it's unfortunate that, you know, it's like every time somebody is writing Daredevil, they write the name down, like kind of like I would write Nico Daredevil, Mr. Nico Daredevil, Mr. and Mrs. Nico Daredevil. I would write it on every notebook. I would like steal.
Okay, Karen. Okay.
I would, if only I could fix it. And so I feel like what happens is everybody writes it and then they go, but what if you move the space? Dared evil. And like everybody does a Matt goes too far storyline, right? And every time Matt goes too far, which is far too frequent, right? Every time,
like once a year. It's once every 10th issue, Matt's like pushing the line, and then someone goes, you know, Daredevil's not a hero anymore, and Matt's like, no.
But I was just gonna beat this man to death with this stick. I have a minute.
No.
Right? But so every time Matt's about to, you know, punch a priest or something, Spider-Man comes in and is like, thwip, I'm going to stop you because I'm a street tough and I'm from Queens, you know, and, or whatever. And and Daredevil, that was thwipping. And Daredevil's like, and that was blocking the thwips with the sticks, right? So I think my point here, right, is somewhere I got too excited about acting it all out. But my point was, once upon a time, that Daredevil and Spider-Man have this completely inseparable relationship. Daredevil even managed to appear in the pages of a Spider-Man title during the era of Born Again. Like,
oh shit.
Yeah, they've had a number of minis together, of, you know, one-shots together. There have been times where Spider-Man is like, no, if Daredevil's here, it's going to be okay. And like, it's such a moment. You know what I mean?
What's Spider-Man doing during Devil's Reign?
Standing by Daredevil where he belongs. It's like,
good.
Because they had a falling out. Like, and it was like, yeah. And Peter was like, if you step out of line again. And Matt was like, I won't. And then like later on, Pete was like, do you need someone? And Matt was like,
oh no, I'm not gonna last through reading those, am I?
the Darcy run is like so incredibly a study of what makes these characters rich. And I'm so glad that you asked about Devil's Reign, because the truth is, so much of where Daredevil is right now must be generated to interact with where the MCU is headed, right? Because they never do anything by accident. as everybody speculates that the Thunderbolts are building up in the MCU, all of a sudden, brilliant writer gets a brilliant team of incredibly diverse heroes, some of whom you're going to be able to recognize from the TV shows and the movies, and it's suddenly the new Thunderbolts, and it's out of nowhere, and it's such a... But that's even the point, like the synergy is there, right? So it's even kind of funny because there's accidental synergy, right, in what we're doing. We are also on our partner show covering Hawkeye, Kate Bishop 1 through 5, and it's a personal favorite of mine. I'm such a big Kate Bishop guy. It's, you know, she's just flawless. Like, if you're asking me to name like the most perfect female heroes of all time, it's like Wonder Woman, Kate Bishop, Rhoda. And so I feel very positively when Marvel gives her a book, right? And by that I mean Kate Bishop, not Rhoda. And so the Kate Bishop series has her facing off against one of the circuses of crime.
Oh, is that what are we dealing with that right here? Is this a circus of crime, or is this just the Ringmaster?
So here's where I'm gonna go with that. You know, when Marvel has a good name and a good property, right? They're not afraid to overutilize it to a defeating point, because one of the things that, as I adjust my Deadpool hat, one of the things that allows them to do is then they just don't reprint what didn't work. That didn't work? Okay, it's gone. They relaunched The Punisher 4 times in like 5 years. One time as God's punishing angel, and that didn't work. So Garth Ennis, who is like the grittiest motherfucker, like when you like most Garth Ennis comics come with a scratch and sniff testicle scent, you know what I mean? So when Garth Ennis took over Punisher a month later, he was just like, yeah, that angel shit not ever coming up again, and they just moved on. People didn't the Punisher temporarily became a Frankenstein monster in the sewers of New York. Frankencastle just never comes up anymore.
So you're saying that, like, yes, this might be a circus of crime, but the one in Kate Bishop is a different circus of crime because it's a good name.
Think of it like the Yankees, right? The Yankees that played in 1956 are certainly not the same Bronx Bombers that are playing in 2022. And if
kidding.
If they are, I want to know what kind of HGH those
well, you say that, but like in comics, like it's still Matt Murdock. It's not like we've gone to Matt Murdock IV.
Yeah, but there's like a difference between good guys and bad guys, unless you're like
really.
Like, yeah, unless you're like
how many? So we're on like Victor Von Doom Part 5 right now.
No. If you're like the bad guy. If you're like the bad guy, I'm like gesturing so hard my headphones are gonna fly out. But like, if you're that dude, if you're like, you know, there's no other Magnetos running around. Like, I didn't just open up a recent issue and they recently introduced a Mexican Magneto named Magneto Sanchez. Like, it's not where they're going in that direction.
But also, like, what if we just chose a different genocide for Magneto to have come from?
Kind of,
but also like let's not like remove one of the few like really great Jewish like representations within these fields, etc., etc.
I completely agree, but like they just update wars.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's this kind of the danger of the sort of balance of the comic reading experience, right? So what's so strange to talk about is there's kind of no way that we can look at this kind of Spider-Man issue as exemplary of an average Spider-Man issue, right? Because the average Spider-Man issue puts a lot more focus on the bad guy and like, you know, the Stan Lee style of, you know, 8 pages setting it up, you know what I mean? And I would imagine that, you know, Spider-Man has anything in his personal life happening, and this issue did not have room for that.
It did not. I needed Nico to like walk me through who these women that he's not seeing are. because like his aunt's all like Mary Jane, and he's like, no, I have a girlfriend. I was like, okay, so Gwen Stacy's still alive. Good call. And then they're like, but what about this blonde bitch? And I'm like, isn't he 16? Why is this woman at the newspaper flirting with him? Like, what? And it's just like, no, he just gets a redhead, a brunette, and a blonde.
And I like.
He doesn't have time for any of them.
I love that you said Getza though. Like,
right, because like that's the thing with these nerds. They just get girls. They just get girls in these, and you're like, why are you paying attention to him? He's blowing you off. He has a girlfriend. Why are you all like, oh, Peter, tell me about how you get these photos? And I'm just like, no, bro, no. Get some self-respect. Head on down to the cubbyhole, and start making out with girls instead of whatever this kid is.
I have such a weird I love that we're having so much trouble talking about the Spider-Man of this, because like it's not Daredevil, you know what I mean?
I know.
In a lot of ways, this is like an annual, or it's assistant editors month, or it's a fill-in, you know what I mean? It's a drawer issue. I'm super about it.
But like it's not a drawer issue though, apparently. It's like important.
It is. It's like it's such a bonding moment for these two. And I think it is so well executed through the interplay, right? Let's toe into the circus for a moment, shall we? Here's the thing about this issue that very works for me. Spider-Man and Daredevil have the same fighting style. At this point, they have the same body type. They will soon have the same primary color. They will soon have the same primary accent color, because even though the blue is very predominant, I think the black frequently overtakes the blue. You know what I mean? They are very quickly approaching being beautiful mirrors of the same man at kind of different points of his life, bound by responsibility, the loss of a male figure, never really close with your birth mother, but had loving people to take care of you. Because look, I'm a Stick apologist. I know. I think Stick did the best he could. Okay.
I give it up for the nuns.
The nuns mean everything to me. But so
yeah, no, I hear you that Spider-Man is very much who if Matt hadn't been so like, I gotta study, I gotta make sure my dad thinks I'm a good kid. Like if Matt had been given the room to like slip out his window at night while he was all like a jacked up 16-year-old, he would have turned into Spider-Man.
Yeah.
He sees himself.
And it kind of, okay.
Without seeing himself. Or him, really.
Well, I mean, but to thwip onto your point for a moment. Okay. Spider-Man manages to be a success where Daredevil in a similar situation falters despite a higher degree of expectation. Like, there is no Young Daredevil Chronicles. I have never been given the opportunity by Marvel to write a book about a 16-year-old Daredevil just cruising the streets of Hell's Kitchen.
How is this? You're telling me this is what hasn't happened? That we've done everything else that you could do to a sad little Catholic guy with no eyesight, and we haven't had, Daredevil babies. We're just like, wow. Especially because they keep de-aging when he gets hit.
Well, part of the problem is he doesn't meet Lester or Wilson until like 130 and like 180 in his original run. So like, they're just not there.
Right, but like he could be punching up other things.
Agreed. No, I'm with you. I don't know why we don't have this, right? But so I kind of even think then that's even more my point, is the reason that Daredevil was not more personally successful, whereas Spider-Man was, is because Spider-Man, I feel so bad saying this, owes a lot to Norman Osborn, because without Harry, if Harry had been Foggy, there is no way Peter could have pulled any of this off. And if Foggy had been Harry, imagine what Daredevil could be right now. Like, I'm not coming after my precious Foggy, but Foggy is not a caretaker.
Right.
And I think that's a huge difference, and they couldn't have known it here. They couldn't have known it here, but like, it's amazing the contextual level of it.
I might also need an offline debrief on whether or not Harry Oswald is as he is in which movie?
No movie has gotten my poor Harry right.
Okay, all right. Because there's two very different ones, and I feel like
Oh no, well no,
okay. we don't have an Oscorp.
Well, no, and like I wasn't even putting one in the Holland verse. I was specifically somehow counting it as two different Green Goblins. Like in my head, I'm like, it's like two different Normans. So it's like there's it's the same Norman. Oh, and it wasn't even Harry. Okay. Because I mean, they're not no one's calling James Franco to be in a Marvel movie anytime soon.
Why? We let other people.
So here's my question for you.
Okay.
The ultimate crux of this issue is a question of control, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot going on in this issue that couldn't be boiled down in a 4-page story. Guys show up, they go to the circus, bad guy wants to take over circus, fight bad guy, get possessed by bad guy, break free of possession, nearly die. Like Tori and I in our comic, storytelling days, we've told this in about 4 pages. Like,
yep.
I'm not saying that this is decompressed even. I'm saying it's a specific stylized choice for narrative pacing. And because of that, there isn't a huge wealth outside of the textual levels, but it does lead me to something that is at the heart of every Daredevil story, and in many ways, a lot of the Spider-Man story. The precious commodity of joy, fighting through this heaviness of responsibility, right, is an overwhelming factor in these heroes' lives, and the villains that most compel Daredevil, the villains that push him the furthest most frequently, are the villains that subvert his ability to control his own emotions, whether it's Purple Man, Mr. Fear, who, is no great favorite of mine historically. I think Mr. Fear is way too on the nose to be a Daredevil villain any day of the week. But I do think there is something to be said about teaming these two guys up when the preservation of identity is so central to Spider-Man and Daredevil. Like, even if Tony Stark's armor, if Tony Stark gets possessed, I'm pretty sure he has stuff built into his armor to stop him. You know what I mean? Oh God, deadly weapon in the hands of a bad guy now. Oh no. But like outside of Axis, where, Tony Stark got his polarity flipped by magic, there's, you know what I mean? So I feel like there is something to be said about the contextual element of hypnosis.
For me, I think it's so interesting to have this so back to back with the Purple Man, because they are specifically both hypnosis ideas. And in the Purple Man, Matt specifically says it's not visual what's going on. And then in this one, we get a visual. So it's like, not only is Matt able to I kind of wonder if this one was supposed to come out before Daredevil 4. But it doesn't quite make sense because it's just such an interesting choice to show Matt proving the more wild hypnotism he's not bothered by, and then to just go back to regular hypnotism and be like, yeah, he's also not bothered by this, and you're like, well, yeah, we figured. It's just so it's an interesting choice to put them back to back and in kind of a backwards way when it has to deal with that.
It makes you sound even smarter because of something you didn't even say on the air earlier when we were talking, and we were talking about setting up issue 5 and stuff. You highlighted how it feels in many ways like issue 5 represents a specific demarcation point of change in Daredevil as a character, in Daredevil's life and his personality. Perhaps this was meant to go earlier, but in terms of creating a blocking narrative, kind of like a swoosh, right? Mm-hmm. It makes more sense to put this after Purple Man and kind of break that up a bit more, because in that way, we're just going to call this episode, Daredevil 4.5.
Yeah, because it has some of those same themes on how everyone works out and how we get past this and all of this stuff. But then at the same time, it sort of pushes it both pushes things forward on some of the Daredevil plots and also doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to know what happened in this one to keep everything fine. But if you do know what happened, you can see why there's such a huge shift between where the love triangle is in Daredevil 4 and where the love triangle ends up in Daredevil 5, which is like amped way up. So I'd like to give it up to our lovely illustrator Steve Ditko for getting to have all of the acrobatic fun in this one. Just like all of it. I do feel bad for him though, because like webbing is such a bitch to draw, especially like complicated network
where it has to look the same and stuff.
Yeah, and you're just like I've done it. It sucks. Drawing your own fishnets is no fun, but like I think that this is just a really fun. It's like a fun, lighthearted piece that is very fascinating to look at because we're looking at it through the Daredevil lens.
Yeah.
And so like as a Spider-Man story, I'm sure it's pretty a little bit run of the mill, but like as a Daredevil story, it's a little bit like, this is interesting.
It's a shock.
It's a shock. And it's also, it's one of those things where like, you can feel from the beginning that this isn't Daredevil's story, but we do spend a lot of time in Daredevil's head. So like it's a little bit of the why are we switching narrators throughout this whole thing?
And I feel like they lavished Daredevil with time at the very beginning in a way that made it almost like, if you don't know who Daredevil is, check out this cool cat. And I just kind of want to be like, where the fuck is this guy in Daredevil? Like,
yes, this is a very cool Matt Murdock. Steve Ditko's Matt Murdock is he listens to jazz.
Yes, he's a hep cat.
He's a hep cat.
In an unironic way, like not in a white person discovered Coltrane way. Like it's real good, right?
This is a guy who will head up to Harlem and he fucks.
Yeah. And like I love how hard this bangs because one of the things about making Daredevil cool here is it paves the way for cool Daredevil later on. Like, it's sort of that thing where people probably remember moments from things better than they remember the reality of things. And, you know, I'm going to use 2 examples from Buffy the Vampire Slayer just as a common point. But people love to point out how Oz is so quiet and Oz doesn't speak much. But if you actually watch it, Oz has like a moment like that every fucking episode at a certain point where he's actually having many more poignant moments than the characters that are being credited with all the poignant moments because they're using that surprise trope. They're using that moment of, and it's coming from him, so it's more powerful. And that's a trick they use from having introduced him so quiet and using him so sparingly. Conversely, when Angel shows up on Buffy, with very few exceptions, like once he starts appearing later on, or Buffy starts appearing later on, the characters are much more polished. You put your best foot forward in a crossover moment, right? And I feel like there's a sort of sense of every time Angel showed up on Buffy, it was very, it's do or die right now.
Right.
And, yeah.
I remember I was watching some interview for something where even the Marvel actors have talked about when they do the big ones where they're all together, they're not actually playing the characters. They're really playing like the archetype of the character because you just don't have time or the ability to add on like your 15 nuances.
Yeah.
And it's why like Tony Stark comes across super fucking weird in Civil War. But then again, so does Steve Rogers. Like they come off as very extreme versions of themselves, which they have to be for it to work. But then like you come back to them in a later movie and you're like, well, what happened to the asshole who said, you know, I would need you to kill your best friend because he killed my parents kind of thing.
And that's kind of like the humorous folly of She-Hulk and Deadpool. Right, so Deadpool and She-Hulk and Dupe and
I don't know her.
They're all Dupe's one of my favorites. He's just a green floating blob. They're all fourth wall breaking characters
Mm-hmm.
who, when they appear in their own thing, that is all they do. They're constantly going, can you believe this? I would never have been able to do this with the comics code. And snap right back to the adventure. They don't do that when Deadpool's in X-Force. They don't do that when, I mean, as a rule, it happens. But, you know, when Jen Walters is a regular member of the Fantastic Four, she doesn't get as many fourth wall breaking moments because you don't have the precious commodity of shared space. And so for all the ways that we're supposed to be talking about this issue of Spider-Man, we kind of are, because that's perhaps why this issue has stood the test of time, has been reprinted 3 times, because this Spider-Man issue really does do a beautiful job blending and capturing the elements of Spider-Man and Daredevil that need to exist on the page. The problem is, if we did want to talk about some of the more nuanced elements, there are some weird inconsistencies why the hypnosis worked on this page and then not this page, but then again on this page and not on this page. You know, there's some silly inconsistencies, but I would rather treat them as an element of a medium getting its footing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather enjoy what this book represents to the bigger picture of the narrative Marvel comic universe. If it weren't for this issue, Charlie Cox never would have appeared in No Way Home. And that is one of the most defining moments of my year.
Sorry, I'm just a little. I was really happy when that moment happened. Anyway, right. It's why when people were suddenly like, yeah, they cut a bunch of like Matt Murdock stuff out of Hawkeye. Like I almost threw my phone across the room, and I was like, you better be fucking lying to me because I'm not going to be able to handle this. I really dig how kind of quickly we get into things as they go. Like there's a really sweet little meet cute moment for Spider-Man and Daredevil, and then like we zip away really quickly so into Daredevil time, like you mentioned, and then we set up the circus bit. And then we go to that circus and there's just a bunch of goons flying around, and we get J. Jonah. Like, I feel like we hit all of like the major points really, really quickly in the first 8 pages. And then it's like, all right, now we're going to go to the circus. And that's when all of like the fun's going to happen. So like, they really just like punch out everything that it's going to take you to get there. Then you're like, oh, okay.
And it's Gymboree for like, 16 pages.
Yeah. And like, I wrote down, this circus of crime seems to be filled with crime clowns because they're bad at what they do.
Yeah.
They're not good. They're not good.
It is specifically a conversation that I get into with old men at the gym, right? When old men at the gym come up to me and they're like, you know, for the most part, yeah, I haven't read comics since the, I guess I bought my last book.
Because you're wearing something. Okay.
I'm always in comic gear at the gym.
Because I'm like, so these old men just like bother you with their ball sweat? Like,
no. Everybody in my gym is very friendly. I go to a very community vibe kind of gym. Everybody takes care of everybody. When somebody doesn't come for 2 or 3 days at the normal time, you're like, where's Gary? So like, you know, it's a thing, right? Okay. And I'm always in one of my, you know, Captain America Under Armours or a Hulk tank top, you know, something. And everyone's like, you see these movies? You read these books still? Yeah, I haven't read one since like 1983. You know,
that's my dad.
I remember, the doctor, the Mr. Doom, the Mr. Doctor would have Fantastic Stretcho on the rack and would be lecturing him aggressively, you know, I'll kill you and take your wife. And he ultimately, I don't know what Grunkle Stan is delivering. It's just Gravity Falls. It's just Grunkle Stan the whole way through, right? And then he's like, you know, it's while Doom is lecturing that Stretcho Fantast gets away. And, you know, and I'm like, yeah, no, that has not been comics since like 1971, right? I like the attempt, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like at the heart of it, right? all said and done, I really scratched my voice up doing that impression.
You did?
That's why I'm crying.
Funny.
No, but in all seriousness, the thing about it is the silly 14 pages of back and forth with the circus of crime is an element of a foregone time that when we look back on it, this is not the issue I would sell Spider-Man and Daredevil with, right? Like every now and then when somebody's like, oh, you've got to go back to the classic Silver Age. And I'm like, for people for whom that is appropriate, absolutely. If I'm sitting down a 60-year-old guy, yeah, why don't you look at this? But if I want to get like a 21-year-old who asks me on Twitter, hey, I want to start reading Daredevil. I see that you post about him a lot. You know, what can you tell a 21-year-old non-binary person who loves Daredevil and has seen some Marvel movies? Well, if I'm like, well, do you love Spider-Man? Great. Don't go read this. That's bad. Read Devil's Reign, where you can get Spidey and Daredevil now. Read one of the several Daredevil Spider-Man miniseries. So I think positive on the issue, happy it exists, glad for what it did, glad we covered it, even though we didn't, and but don't think anybody else really needs to go out and read this ever.
I mean, I think this is definitely not something that you should read to like find out if you're like I love Spider-Man and I enjoy when Daredevil shows up in it. Let me go back to their first meeting. My response would be like, okay, but maybe followed up with something like in the Frank Miller run.
Oh, or like, how have we not gone there? The Omega Drive, the Mark Waid Spider-Man, Daredevil, Punisher crossover, or the incredible Black Cat, Spider-Man, Daredevil two-parter, or the team up with Superior Spider-Man in Wade's run. I'm gonna just keep naming Wade stuff, but like, you know, it's there.
Yeah, like there's so much more to do than this one. And I mean, it's so interesting because like we are gonna come up against some issues in Daredevil where we're like, don't read this because it is offensive. This is just like mediocre. But I mean, it's super interesting for me because like we have this panel where there's this like half face of Spider-Man on Peter Parker's face. And I'm just like, what a great way to like showcase that he's thinking using his Spider-Man thoughts, because, you know, not everyone can have like a giant horned shadow following them around for the drama of it all. You know, we get J. Jonah Jameson has been this way since the dawn of time, I guess. Like we get like all of these things that are very much like touch points of Spider-Man. So like it is also a great way to introduce Spider-Man. It's just that you sort of have to like put on the cap of like, it's the 60s. Like it's gonna get weird.
And ultimately, I think I wish this was just a little shorter. You know, it's one of the things that like sitcoms do so beautifully. They put it on fast forward just a little bit and they cut the jokes that don't work. And watch the unedited, right? But maybe...
I definitely feel like this should have had like 4 pages of just Spider-Man plot before it, of like either tying something up or like day in the life of like Peter Parker dating his girlfriend, and then Aunt May being like, but what about MJ? And him being like, quit putting me on blind dates. And then he goes and he rescues Daredevil. And then you get 14 pages of the two of them. And it's much more compact, much easier to swallow. And like, I feel like that is probably where it wants to be. I mean, if we tried to do this now, like this whole thing would be a completely different beast. And I can't decide if they would stretch the whole thing out into like 4 issues, or if they would like slam it into like, and here's the 2.5 pages of Daredevil in here.
I was literally going to say it's either going to be a 4-page story or a 100-page story.
Yeah, there's no in between.
There's nothing else.
No.
And that's even kind of the narrative that's kind of happened. There's a Spider-Man Daredevil one-shot and a Spider-Man Daredevil 4-part mini. Like, you know, it's where the industry is. And
Mhm.
one of the things I love about, Infinite Comics is perhaps there's ways to revisit some of these classic stories with a little bit more luxe, right? They're doing that for Wolverine right now, celebrating Life of Wolverine. I wouldn't hate, Ages of Daredevil, and maybe just put a little polish on a character that was filled with love, and creators that wanted to work on him, and creators that wanted to put in the effort, but didn't always have the emotional means to create the sort of dexterous work that was in their heart. So I guess on that harrowingly honest note about our heroes and their failings, this is
I think the only thing that like we didn't really get into is that it feels like this is the first person to sense that Spider-Man is a kid.
Yeah.
Is that the first time that like someone's come close to figuring out that Spider-Man is not a man?
I'd have to know, I'd have to do a little bit more research. My early Spider history gets pretty muddy with later Spider revisionism. Like, if it weren't for the fact that Daredevil's whole origin is so thoroughly documented throughout the journey, and that is his entire childhood is either in the 5 issues of Man Without Fear or the bits of the 6 issues of Yellow. There's not a lot of places to look. You could look at Daredevil season 1 graphic novel. You can take a look at Daredevil #1. I'm thinking like the 150s. There's a retelling of the origin. I think there's a retelling of annuals, right? So like, there's not as much Daredevil to parse. Is what we were saying. There's no young Matt Murdock chronicles. You know what I mean? But like, I really loved Nick Bradshaw did a book called Spidey a couple of years ago where he told more kid Spider-Man stories. And I would hate to give you an answer that's equal parts that, the Untold Tales of Spider-Man, actual Spider-Man, the movies, the animated series, and also I have fever dreams. So, Spider mislead you, because everything in this episode has been 100% on Spider brand, 1000% accurate, and at no point did we fail to talk about the Spider-Man Daredevil connection as listed in the abstract document.
Wait, but we did forget one thing, and that is Amazing Spider-Man #18.
Oh, they're gonna say Karen's fabulous hair that doesn't get up.
Well, okay, so Karen's hair looks great. Girl got an upgrade. She got an updo. Sue Storm is out there going, her hair looks good. So A+, go Steve Ditko. Thank you for the fashion. But like,
just heads, 18 heads in a duffel bag.
I mean, also like, Steve Ditko really knows how to draw hypnotized creepy eyes on the crowd, because like that is some freaky look, blank looks in their faces. So
okay, Amazing Spider-Man 18.
We've got 5 seconds left. I think we can cover it. Okay, let me tell you, Amazing Spider-Man #18. Nico says to me, he says, he's on 2 pages. It's going to be super easy. You're not going to have to do like any of this. Don't worry about it. I open it up and there's Daredevil on 1 page. Now, when he says 1 page, my brain is like, he's like at a microphone. Like you get at least like head to like hip action, horns to hips. No, he is like a floating head that is like, I am disappointed, amongst others giving I am disappoint, because I guess like in 17 Spider-Man did something super shitty or whatever, and then his second appearance on a page and you're still thinking, you're like, okay, like maybe like he's like swings by and is like, I'm still disappointed or whatever. No, he doesn't even say anything. It's just his head super tiny amongst other heads that are super tiny, and I'm just like, this is such a like product placement for people to be like, I don't know that yellow one. And so like for me, like Nico set the bar of disappointment, like roll low. And somehow managed to score under even that. And like normally like Nico talks in hyperbole, so you always like put like 5 grains of salt in there, but like no, he was not wrong. Anyway, Nico, what were your thoughts?
I mean, it's a great way to lend credibility to a character.
Yeah, to whose character?
The other character. Because like now Daredevil's so Daredevil's so flossy, he showed up in Spider-Man. That's super glamorous.
I mean, I guess it's one of those like now he's surrounded, but now that you've made it so that Spider-Man thinks of him in the same like area zone as like Captain America, like we're all supposed to be like, oh, he's in like an echelon above now.
And now like Spider-Man outsold Daredevil, so people saw him and might go up to the newsstand guy. Hey, mister, I'm going to be a cranky old man at a gym someday, and I want to know about these characters so I can lecture people offensively when they're trying to do their squats in peace. And, you know, so I just want to be left alone to squat.
It's okay. I get those conversations over dinner on Sundays. So like 50-50 on who's got it worse right there. So definitely do not feel like if you need to complete your Daredevil work that you need to get your hands on a real physical copy of 18. Trust me, you ain't missing much.
No, and you know, so okay, it's kind of like this for me, right? Having Daredevil appear in Amazing Spider-Man upgrades Daredevil.
Oh yeah.
But
huge.
The real thing it does is it updates the style guide. Now there's a Ditko style Daredevil head that you can trace whenever you need if you're in the bullpen.
Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
And somebody's got to do the in-house ads, and somebody's got to ink it the way Steve wants it. And you want to fill your book up. How many fucking times can you put Peter Parker's fucking face? He's not even hot yet. So like, how many times can you put this fucking kid's face? It's creepy. Draw something else. But like, I don't want to look at J. Jonah Jameson. So like, he's not hot yet either. So like, he gets hot. Oh no, J. Jonah, like,
All right, cool. I can't wait.
It could happen. Right. So, I mean, the problem is it's not a problem, but there are artists that draw everybody like a super fucking hot underwear model.
Yeah, I know. We just did those Spider-Man Infinite comics. I saw us all staring at them glutes.
Right. So, like, it's just there's some people that can't get drawn. Like, there's just some people that can't get drawn Uggo, and there's some people that can't draw Uggo. So, every now and then there's a real nice cross section in between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, all said and done, Amazing Spider-Man 18 ups Daredevil's value, doesn't really hurt Spider-Man's value. It kind of didn't do anything for our value, but it gave us something nice to blend in with 16, get a nice churn going.
Yeah, it's a nice little piece of parsley on there.
Yeah. It in an omnibus edition there'd be a little box that shows the 2 little heads, right? It would be cute. But I do believe on that note, we are officially out of web fluid. It's not something we can help. We don't.
Oh yeah, definitely gone dry.
Yeah. So I guess until we're ready to. Somehow the Matador isn't the most offensive bit of cultural rep.
It starts and it's like when it's folks. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about it. And we're going to be doing it in the next 30 minutes because we only have so many hours in our weeks to record these. So we're doing a double today. But get ready for apologism towards the writing of the Matador when we shouldn't be. But we're gonna because we know what's coming up.
Well, so until then, I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nico Action. That's NicoAction.
And I'm Tori. You can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I.
And until next time, stay fearless.
Stay fearless, everybody. Twip.
Flip, flip.